All right. Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of Art Design and Conversations. This is our monthly show where we feature creative professionals from the field of art and design and allied creative fields, where we get to talk about all the interesting stuff that's happening in different creative fields. A little bit about ourselves before we start off. We have a very interesting designer here that we're going to talk to today. So Art Design Conversations is a monthly program by Beats, which is our design studio. My name is Sandeep. I'm managing director of the studio. It's a studio based out of Bhubaneswar in Orissa that creates elegant, ethnically inspired, and environmentally friendly products. We start with a firm belief in the power of art and design to make people's lives better. And our products are handmade, contemporary, and we believe in zero plastic packaging. Our vision as a studio is to inspire lives with inspiring design from our state of Orissa, which is a very vast creative reservoir of crafts. Why Art Design and Conversations? Well, we decided that while we're in the journey of creating different products, this series would lie in the exploration of methodologies and motivations that underlie indigenous craftsmanship. It encompasses an exploration of how craft items intersect with our daily existence and environment, and particularly within the framework of contemporary design ideologies and the escalating emphasis on sustainability. As a result, these dialogues seek to unravel the ecological and communal consequences associated with mass manufactured goods and spotlight the transformative roles of crafts in reshaping contemporary perceptions of products. Given this short description, I would like to welcome Dishari Mathur to this show. Dishari, welcome and thanks for participating in ADC.
Thank you for having me.
Dishari, before I launch into the questions, let me give a short bio so that people get to know about you a little bit. So Dishari is an artist and designer. She's based out of Jaipur in India, but she's talking to us right now from the UK. Her work lies at the intersection of traditional craft, material research, and design. Primary media is circular ceramics and Jaipur blue pottery, and she works with industrial waste materials to create new recipes adopted by traditional craft for culture and economic sustainability. She's got a very interesting background in education, which we'll also explore. She grew up in Jaipur with a fascination for making and materials, gravitating towards the crafts of Jaipur. She studied interior design at the Savannah College of Art and Design in the US, and she designed workplace interiors before pursuing innovation design engineering at the Royal College of Art in Imperial College, London, UK. She founded Project New Blue as her thesis work while collaborating with scientists at MNIT in Jaipur and Jaipur Blue Pottery Artisans in the years 2020-21. Again, another part that we'll talk about. She approaches waste as the abundant material in nature today and allowing accessibility for experimentation and new perspectives. She researches into new waste materials from construction and steel industry while learning about old craft techniques and creating works as a part of a new material conversation. Welcome, Dishari. Really glad to have you here. And just for the interest of full disclosure, Dishari has been part of a wonderful residency here in Bhubaneswar. I call the Orissa Craft Odyssey, where she worked with bell metal artisans in the Barakati craft cluster, and some of the products she made was absolutely wonderful. And hopefully you guys will be able to see it on the website in orissacraftodyssey.org. So, Dishari, I'm just going to start off with a very basic question. Tell us a little bit about your journey as a designer, all this wonderful stuff that you've done as a young designer, traveling to different places, exhibiting in different festivals. What was your motivation? How did you start off on this?
Well, firstly, thank you for having me. This is so exciting, and thank you for creating this platform for these conversations. So, my journey as a designer, I grew up in Jaipur, in an artistically inclined family of doctors. So, academics was always very important. And as a child, I used to love painting and drawing and just making things as a young person. So I took up science and fine art in high school. which
Okay.
was a rare combination in those days. And I wanted to consider a career that would combine both, and
Okay.
that, like, led me to stumble upon design. So I applied to schools in the US and India, and I got through SCAD.
Mm-hmm.
And the first motivation for me to go there was a great scholarship,
Right.
but also it just provided me an open playground to consider, like, over 40 disciplines in the
Mm-hmm.
field of art and design. And as a 17-18-year-old from India, I just didn't know there was so much to do in this field, and it was just mind boggling to go there and just realize how much you can do in so many areas. So I started with visual effects, which is like computer graphics for film, and that was my first major at SCAD. And I realized I really liked and enjoyed doing environments, but I didn't like being stuck to the screen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, how can I do environments, but in real life? And so
Right.
I literally went from designing environments in the screen to real life and chose interior design as my major at SCAD. And yeah, so that was pretty much where it all began. And as soon as I entered the classroom, the whole, like, that was like my first encounter with the whole romance of understanding material and form and space, and like the alchemy of all of this coming together to create the perfect environment, understanding people that are going to live there or
Mm-hmm.
inhabit that space as employees or workers in a workspace. So yeah,
So
that,
a lot happened in Savannah when you walked in there and started looking at all this stuff. But like, how much would you credit Jaipur as a place in your creative journey? I know you came back to it later on after you finished up your education, but like, even even the inspiration to make signs and like the artistic side of both during education. Like, how much do you credit your environment in Jaipur and the environment around there to your inspiration to go in this journey of becoming a designer? Because we all know Jaipur is this place which has got so much going on when it comes to the field of culture and art.
yeah, I mean, I think Jaipur is a it's played a very crucial role in my building years as a creative, really, whether it was painting or whether it was being in performance arts. So I also learned singing and dancing and Kathak in school, and all of that really came from Jaipur. So like every festival, there was a little bit of all of these elements.
Right.
Or like even in daily life, like whether you were like doing everyday things, celebrating even a birthday, like there would always be an element of Jaipur, like whether it was in the architecture, if you're going out,
Right.
like so I think Jaipur it's a cultural city. There is craft in everything, whether the way they craft their food, it's a normal aloo tikki, but
Right.
you see it's just done perfectly. Or
Yeah.
it is in the gotapatti embroidery, or it is in, so like when you grow up with all of these things, you just like really embrace them, and it also becomes a part of you, and you start to really, I think, embody it in making decisions as a
Yeah,
professional.
I mean, the reason I was asking this question is obviously when you're surrounded by this and somebody who's keen observer, such as yourself, you would get to see and imbibe, the kind of delicate balance of craftsmanship and product creation that just is happening all around you at all points of time. Did you also have, like, design as a field is a choice that people are making, students or young people are making these days, which wasn't such a thing that people used to aspire to back in the day when everybody wanted to go like doctor, engineer, and something more conventional. But when you think about design as a discipline and as a profession, Was there an inspirational idol or a motivation of some sort? Okay, this is what that's the kind of work I want to do, or that's the guy or person that I aspire to be like. Were you ever attracted to anybody of that sort as an inspiration?
I think that there was not like one person, but I was always, as I started in interior design, there were multiple people that became my design heroes.
Right.
So starting out, like when I went from high school, there was no one person that I idealized. I just knew I needed to mix these two things together.
Right.
But as soon as I got into interior design, I used to admire the works of people like Patricia Arqueola, David Rockwell, Marcel Wonders. These were people in US, in America, who had a very distinct design philosophy and a very in-depth understanding of materials, and more importantly, of people that they were designing for. And that was very inspiring. And then I think also studying art history at the time, I was very, very inspired, I remember, by Paul Cézanne, by Piet Mondrian. These were all artists, and I was particularly interested in how they arranged color in their composition and that kind of like color in their spaces. So I think I've just like had different aspirational idols. Then I remember while working in an interdisciplinary project, I studied about IDEO and their principles of design thinking, and how human-centric design had come about. And for a while, like, they were my heroes, and I was studying all about it. And lastly, I remember when I was looking into innovation and mixing like biodesign and materials, I remember coming across the work of Neri Oxman, and she does this brilliant work with like architecture and biology. And I was just like, wow.
Stunning work,
I had no idea you could, bring disciplines together and create something so amazing like that. So over the years, I feel like my heroes have changed, and I'm like always looking at a mix of a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think that's, Neri Oxman is such a brilliant example. I mean, if anybody wants to read more about her, or if you want to watch a documentary, just watch Abstract in Netflix. There's a great piece on Neri Oxman. It's really good. So a lot of inspiration, decision to go out there and do something in SCAD, walk into a new world, get to see and talk about design and material research on day in, day out. What was your like signature memory from like SCAD, like a pivotal moment? Like all the people I've talked to in ADC, they've all had this pivotal moment. They've always had this like an imposter syndrome when they walk in, and they're like, "Do I really belong here?" And then there's something that clicks. Was there such a signature memory that you had? Okay, yeah, this is it. This is what makes me who I am. Was there such a thing that do you recall during your time there?
I remember. So I was doing my capstone project, which is like your last project that you do as a senior in interior design. And I had chosen to study Jawahar Kala Kendra by Charles Correa in Jaipur. And I wanted to create a place where crafts could be studied, but also experienced through architectural details. And I remember explaining this project and, or rather pitching it to a class of people from across 20 countries, but none of them Indian. And my professor later on came up to me and said, "Oh, your story, or what you just said, was like the perfect dal I had in the restaurant. It had the perfect amount of ghee and the perfect amount of all different types of things that they put together to create the story on the plate." I was like, I don't know if that was a pivotal moment, but that just made me feel like I was on the right track to like following my curiosity in terms of like telling the story that resonated with me culturally, and just sticking with it.
Yeah, and the cultural references to dal as a metaphor of getting it together. Was that something stuck in your head?
Yeah, I was like, so with every project, I'm like, have I created the dal? Like, is there
Yeah.
enough ghee in it? Is there enough masala in it? Has it been cooked enough? Has it been thought about enough?
So after SCAD, you came back to India for a while, or did you go to France? There was a period you were in France for a bit, right?
In France.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually, so SCAD, very interestingly, has a location in Lacoste in the south of France, and you could spend a quarter there. So you can take a few classes there, and I was lucky enough to go there and study architectural history. So I have a major in interior design, but I have minors in architectural history and drawing. They were my interests. So I studied there for 3 months, and I also, those were 3 months that I painted. Actually, I painted and actually sold at an exhibition, which was crazy to me. And it was just mind-boggling that you could be in this like valley in the south of France, studying the architecture around and also learning to document it. So that was one of the classes called Travel Portfolio. So we were learning to document our travels as a designer, and then take them back to our inspiration and in our design work. And I was studying architectural history there. So that was a very interesting and pivotal time. I was the only interior design student there. So there were people from like fashion and photography and all kinds of other majors. So yeah, that was a very interesting time during SCAD. But after SCAD, I got my first job in San Francisco at Studio Oplase, which is a really brilliant boutique workplace design firm in the Silicon Valley. Yeah.
And you were there for how long were you there when you were in San Francisco?
I was there for about a year.
Okay.
And I worked, like, one of the most important projects that I worked on through my time there was the Slack headquarters.
Okay.
And the most one interesting thing about that project was that it was inspired by the hiking trail from San Diego to British Columbia. That the CEO used to take. So each floor, it was 10 floors, each floor was inspired by one of the terrains that you would encounter if you were on the hike.
Right. So you finished a year in San Francisco, then you came back to India.
Yeah, I got a job at Gensler in Bangalore. So Gensler is also an American architecture firm. And I got a job there in strategy, in workplace strategy. So that was a slight pivot from being a designer.
So did you feel that that was destiny coming back to India, or did you want to make that move, or was it a conscious plan all along?
It was a little bit of chance, a little bit of being conscious. I was interested in exploring something else that was parallel to design, so not being too far away from it. Design strategy felt like the right choice, and I also got the opportunity, so that was amazing at the time. Coming back to India at the time was I think just pure destiny at the time, I think.
And I mean, because you then had a chance to go back to Royal College, which was again a decision that you took consciously after working for a while in India. What was the motivation behind that?
So I had been in a desk job for 2.5 years at that point, and I was interested in the whole innovation space and getting my hands dirty. So I like I told you, as a child, I was always interested in making things, and I thought I had somewhat I felt detached from that for a while, and I wanted to really explore going back to tactility, and if I could like go back to making things, but also from an innovation lens, like what is something, what's happening in the world that's like innovative, unique, and kind of pushing the barrier. So like there is design that you do that fulfills the needs of today as people, and then there is design that you can do for the future, and I was interested in exploring the latter. So that was how I looked for programs.
And how was the RC experience? What were your
the RC experience?
Learning from the RC experience.
Yeah, the RC experience was incredible. It was like so that I was at the RCA and the Imperial College at the same time, and it was an open playground. Like we were 48 people from, and I was I guess the one of the few, like I was the only interior designer / architecture person on the cohort, and on an everyday basis you were put in a team with one like material scientist, a nano scientist or like biologist, and then there was also fine artists, like just like the whole interdisciplinarity of it was just incredible. And like learning to work with them, to speak their language, to also make yourself understood, while all the time you're still exploring and trying to find a solution to the problem that you're addressing.
How did you guys find common language when you were working with such diverse disciplines together in a team? Was it held together by the problem statement, or was it held together by commonalities that you had in your languages across all these disciplines?
I think it was a lot of meeting halfway and sticking to the design process. So there is a double diamond. I'm sure you've heard of it at one point. There is a double diamond of like you explore, then you convert, and then you explore again, and then So we were somewhat sticking to that, but at the same time, like if like one of the science or like materials people came up with a solution, then it was my responsibility to also like read up and be able to understand, and then same way. So like we were always exchanging, and because we were put into new scenarios every day, so each project is a new industry, so you are anyways a beginner. So treat yourself like a beginner and read anything and everything that is available on it, so that you can all be on the same page and then create something cool together.
I mean, I just find fascinating, and this is one of the things that we've been trying to explore in different places, where I believe the synergy in multidisciplinary teams when it comes to problem solving, if you get your ways of working together, and if you get your your ducks in a row in terms of how you want to solve the problem, I think the results are fascinating, because it leads you into dimensions of solutions that you wouldn't normally think about it. And this is one of the things, we had a chance to talk to some of the urban planners here in Bhubaneswar, and we were talking about including artists and creative people in the urban planning process to reimagine the way you're thinking, rather than just as a pure engineering architectural solution. And I think just the fact that you're specialists working together also brings elements of understanding that you wouldn't normally look at, which I think is quite cool. Was there a project that you recall which was like the acme of all of this collaboration that you did? It was like one of the best ones that you did?
I can talk about two. So one was experimental design, and we were addressing how might we how might surfaces be useful to us in 10 years time. And for us that was transport of food. And so basically, how can we eliminate packaging and storing and selling, or like selling the food with the packaging in 10 years time. So it was me, a sustainable design consultant, a material scientist, and a UX designer together in a team. And so we addressed it by creating a solution of packaging that can appear when you need it to and disappear sustainably when you don't need it.
Wow.
So-
Okay. You need to talk more about this. This sounds very interesting.
So we came up with a way that you can pre-package ingredients
Okay.
in a context, we are in the UK and we are going to do research in like multiple grocery stores, and we come back with this much food and this much plastic
Right.
with
True.
everything.
Yeah.
So our idea was like, we want to create a meal for the night. Let's pre-portion those ingredients for that meal
Right.
and create a material that can hold it together, store it together,
Yeah.
and transport it safely, but can disappear with water. So so the material scientist at this time, and this is us as designers dreaming of this packaging existing. The
Right.
material scientist comes up to us like, hey, do you know about this byproduct from the meat industry, like this type of gelatin? If we
Yeah.
created a way to like mold it around the food, then that could basically create just a little brick of
Right.
the pre-portioned ingredients in that material, and then once it's done, it's dissolvable with water, so that it creates no waste.
Okay. Right. And the
So-
material that you created was made from like biocellulose or things like that.
Yeah, so it's kind of like gelatin.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then
but
you dip it in water, it just disappears after you like take the food out and any of the stuff out. Okay.
yeah. So anyways, you're going to come back and wash your vegetables before you cook, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. So the packaging can disappear while you're washing your vegetables.
Very cool. And so did you guys, were you able to like take it forward, commercialize it, or do anything interesting with it?
No,
That was
it was an experimental design project, and I think all of us went our own ways after it.
I mean,
But I'm
was
sure
that
there's
something that
potential.
was encouraged at the RCA, that you can take your projects forward? Did you have like support systems to commercialize, like a TTO or an office to help you out with that?
Yeah. So there's in RCA there's Innovate UK that you have access to, and then there is Imperial Enterprise Lab, so that
Right.
you can take ideas to. So the second project that I was going to mention is a carbon dioxide adsorbing system. So basically, we were ensuring indoor air quality for cognition. This was in the
Okay.
pandemic when everyone was working from home in closed rooms, and the research was that basically your breath is a toxin when it has been when you've been in a closed room for a certain amount of time, and it can be detrimental to your cognition. So
Right.
you'll feel a little fuzzy and a little like you need a coffee, but it's actually the air.
Right.
So we had addressed that problem and created a device that can work with you. So like a 9 to 5, it'll absorb the CO2, maintain the air quality that is optimal for cognition. And then at the end of the week, you do your laundry, you can just kind of like restore the material basically. So that was something that we tried to go to.
So like an air purifier, but with like it was like an air purifier in some ways.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So sorry, you were saying what happened after that?
Yeah, so I'm saying that was an idea that we thought could become
Go to
a
innovation.
product at the time. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason I really wanted to kind of understand the breadth and depth of the educational experience you've had is I think design education in the country is obviously growing and blossoming, and you're meeting so many new designers. I'm sure you've had the chance to talk to designers who are educated completely in the Indian education system. Has there been an opportunity to compare notes in terms of what you've seen and experienced in your educational experience outside, and how we can learn, or what's working already from what you've experienced outside in the design education system?
So to be honest, I've not been to an Indian design school, so I won't be the best person to like contrast between the two.
Yeah.
But what I can
comparing
comment
notes.
on.
But comparing notes with people who've worked there, you must have had a chance to talk about like what do you guys get to learn or experience. You would have had a chance to that. So just on hearsay and observation, what do you think would make few points?
So I think one of the few things in India I've learned from friends and people that I've worked with is this really strong focus on learning skill and software. And I feel like that's great, and you can be ahead on a few things in the process, but at the same time, like there should be also a focus on just being curious and learning how to think. So skills, I see skills as like tools, right? Now the tools of the trade change. Today, yesterday you were driving a car with gears. Today there's no gears. It's kind of like that. Like you're learning one software today. 5 years later, there's something else that has come. So learning the software is great, but at the same time, like I feel like design schools abroad really like drill you into being a curious person first,
right,
and being open to anything and everything as a design solution. Second thing I would say, which obviously is a clear I'd say advantage, is the interdisciplinarity or the agility that you have. So as a designer, which I know you were just mentioning with the urban designers, but like as a designer, I do not have to stick to the label to be just that. I can also inhale literature on organic chemistry and have a conversation with a material scientist and come up with a solution.
And I think that's such a moot point. Even when you were describing about your journey, you're talking about the opportunity to create art and sell paintings and dabble in architecture and architectural history, while at the same time staying true to your original passion of design and interior design. So there is that. And this is something I was talking to a friend the other day, and they were saying that if you're joining the National School of Drama, for example, every person who goes to National School of Drama tends to have a few more skills in the bag. Like you can be a great actor, but you could be a singer, a musician, or an artist. There are usually 3 or 4 things, tools in the bag that you can explore as kind of a holistic experience of being an artist or a performer. And I think in a similar way, the exploration of multiple disciplines contributes to becoming a wholesome designer, I think, and in that curiosity needs to be facilitated as much as possible. I mean, that's and I think we can compare notes. I know there's some in the audience who are like Muskan and Abhijit, who have been designers. They can share notes on this. The last question on the experience with education and your just constant evolution as a designer. Having done all of that, you came back to India and started working on Project Blue, right? What was that all about? How did that? What was the catalyst for that? Tell the audience about Project Blue, because I've read about it and I've talked to you about it before. But tell the audience about Project Blue.
So New Blue is a project that I started with Jaipur Blue Pottery, and it's a new ceramic material made out of sanitary ware waste, used as a strengthener in the traditional Jaipur Blue Pottery recipe, for the economic and environmental sustainability of the craft. So that's really the crux of it. And how it started, I was at the RCA and Imperial and ready to take on the thesis project, and I really wanted to do something with craft.
Right.
So because of various reasons, I tried to do it in my undergrad with the Jawahar Kala Kendra project, but I was hell bent on doing something with craft. I also came across this statistic that I think India has the largest craft concentration in the world, but only 2% of the global craft market share. and that was, I think that's
Fascinating.
2-3 years old, so I don't know if that's that stands true today, but that at the time to me was really like I was like, why and why is that? I was curious, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to really understand the situation from on the ground. So it was
Yeah.
the pandemic. It was the perfect time for me to go home as well, and so I was home and I looked at the crafts around me. There was only so much you could travel at the time.
Yeah.
So around me there was the textiles, and there was blue pottery and other Jaipur crafts, and Jaipur blue pottery was accessible. I went and talked to them. The artisans were really receptive
Right.
for me to just come there and research. So I
Yeah.
just started with an open mind to understand where can I intervene as an innovation design engineering student. So there needs to be an aspect of innovation, of design, and of engineering. So I started researching and just sitting, being with them, having chai with the artisans, working with them, helping out in the craft unit. And I realized like one of the problems was the inconsistency in the material recipe in terms of strength. And I thought of addressing that in my project from the lens of all three of these things. So there's innovation, design, engineering. And when I started to study the recipe, I thought, okay, it needs strength, but it would need an additive to compensate for the strength. But the additive needs to be cheap, it needs to be accessible, and it needs to work in a way that does not touch the process of the craft. So we are very inspired by how sustainable the craft is already. They are already recycling glass. They are already using multani mitti and other bio resins. So we don't want to touch the stuff that's already brilliant. They only use one firing. Almost contemporary ceramics use 2 firings. They only use 1 firing. That is incredible. So let's not touch that. Let's find an additive, and that's where the waste thing comes in. So what is around me in abundance is waste. It is accessible, it is cheap, and after experimenting with it, so experimentation at this time was a conversation. I am working in the lab at MNIT, and I'm working at the Blue Pottery unit. So I make a small sample with the scientists at MNIT. I take it to the craftsperson. He fires some. Then after firing, he tests it out himself. He gives me notes, and that's how the conversation goes for a few months. So we've tested about like 50 to 60 recipes and come up with the one that works as New Blue.
Do you have something to show to the audience by any chance?
To show to the audience? Yeah, sure.
If you want to share your screen, And this is an ongoing project, right? This is something that's still going on.
Yeah, so this has actually become the basis of my practice today. And I continue to work on it and work with more waste materials and not just sanitary ware waste. Let me share my screen quickly.
I think it's coming along. Yeah, it's just buffering at the moment. Yeah.
So I could quickly play the video if it works.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So these are some of the products that came out from the process, I'm guessing.
Yeah, so you can see the little bit of testing over here.
Yeah.
These are passive cooling tiles. These are architectural tiles, and then there are like tables and vases that we made.
Right.
Can you hear it?
No. I hear the sound. So this is the process of making the clay out of the sanitary ware.
Yeah.
And so you picked up the sanitary ware and the waste from nearby dumps and brought it over, or was there a process of screening that too?
Yeah, so the sanitary ware came from like nearby units,
Right.
and then I discovered Morbi in Gujarat, which is like the biggest sanitary ware production house in India, and they have like they are processing the waste for it to be used. So now I actually get it from there as well.
Right. So what's happening with the project right now? So you're creating new objects out of it, or has this become part of the existing work of the craftsmen that you were already working with? I mean, by the way, how have the craftsmen taken to it? Has there been any resistance at all? Because craftsmen tend to be very set in their disciplinary practices.
Yeah, I actually in the beginning when I wanted to do the experiments, so one was doing the experiments with the small things. Another thing is to make the objects, right?
Yeah.
So earlier there was a lot of resistance in the sense that this is not blue pottery and you can't do this, and we're not know, tempering with the fabric of the main craft. But there were also like one or two craftsmen that were really open because they were interested in improving what they had on hand.
Right.
So they have been really receptive, and they have been able to see how because of this material we are able to make objects that are much bigger than what blue pottery makes. So blue pottery usually used to make objects up to 15 inches. Now we are going up to like 30-40 inches. And even with their like pieces, now they're like, oh, can we use your material to make our bigger pieces? Because they have seen it, they know that it doesn't, they can still paint on it, it is still as flexible as the earlier material was. So that I have seen a change in first being resistant and then like wanting to experiment as well.
So the winning point, the USP, is the fact that they can make larger pieces. That's the one that's most attractive to them.
Yeah, that, and then there is a certain consistency in the strength. So like there is less breakage also.
Why is that? What's the reason behind that?
I think it is just because the waste material that we're using, like sanitary ware waste, it has certain like really good industrial binders and industrial materials that hold the strength that this traditional material did not. So even though it is fired waste that we're using, it's supposed to be non-biodegradable and like not good at all, it still holds a little bit of strength that it gives to the traditional material.
Right. And how do you reduce the actual sanitary waste into the powder that we just saw in the video? So you've got like machines to do that, or it's done that?
So earlier we used a ball mill at once in the lab, but then we used, so you know how these people have chakki peesne ki machine in the craft unit. So at one point we used that. And then that also worked. But now, so in Morbi, which I was talking about, is the industrial manufacturing for sanitary ware. There, the government is looking for ways to use this. So they have people had started buying land to dump the waste. That's how much there was. So they have also started milling it into the particle size that you want, and you can order it from them. So that's also like available now.
So that's convenient. That's convenient. So do you think this is scalable in other formats of ceramic? I mean, there's no reason it can't be reused in other ceramic processes, right?
Yeah.
It's not a Jaipur blue pottery thing. It's not specific to Jaipur blue pottery, the process that you've just created, right? You can use it anywhere at this point, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things you mentioned is that obviously this is a grand exploration of waste, and then the transformation of that into craft. I want to take 2 points here. The first point that you mentioned was that you saw this really startling statistic of how much craft concentration was there in India, and yet I mean, I'm working in the same field, so, and how little of the market share we have in the crafts world. And that kind of, triggered you. Is that where like craft is now going to be one of the bigger areas where you want to work on, because you want to explore more of this? And what does craft mean to you now that you've worked with it so intimately in with the Jaipur Blue Pottery thing?
Yeah, I think craft to me is something that I not only want to explore but learn from. I see it as a reservoir of material wisdom. So, you get traditional books, but these are living systems of knowledge that have been nurtured, researched, refined over generations. There is so much to learn from them. When we think of sustainability, when we think of conscious making, you look at any craft, they are very, I would say, agile in terms of how they make, but they are very consistent in finding materials that are around them.
Right.
They don't believe in going too far to import. Like, that's just not a part of the culture.
It's around.
It is just very local. It is very sustainable, doing as little as you can, but also having that element of exploration and creativity in fulfilling local needs, or rather a creative expression, if you want that.
I mean, that's how craft systems have grown. What stopped us from, what do you believe is the reason we have craft systems that are so evolved in the way they have come along all these years? But what's the barrier in them being more accepted and being a part of our day-to-day lifestyle and, the contemporary thing? What's preventing it from getting there? What's your thought? Now you've worked with so many artisans, not only here in Orissa, but also in Rajasthan. What's your impression of it?
In terms of why it's not widely used?
Yeah, why don't we use it as widely, and we tend to go towards mass manufactured goods in terms of getting things to you?
There are two reasons. One is the cost factor, obviously. There is cost and accessibility, right? So if you have something cheaper available to you more easily, you go to that. Secondly, when I look at it from the making lens, there is a certain inconsistency in the product that comes out. Like, because it's handmade, the aesthetic, there is a certain amount of inconsistency in the aesthetic that as a population we are not very accepting of. Because in other areas, whether it's an iPhone or whether it's like something you're buying from fast fashion, whatever you buy, there's a consistency to it. There is that inconsistency in the aesthetic, and as a population, we are not very accepting of that, I think.
So as a designer, how do you tackle this particular issue when you're working with craftsmen, and the fact that there is an economic demand for some kind of conformity in the kind of products that are coming out from this place? How do you work with artisans to explain that there is this perception that's there? Or do you just encourage the natural deviation that comes from product to product when people make it, and just learn to celebrate that?
I think it's the latter. We need to learn to celebrate it. Like, there is so much beauty in something that comes from hand making. There is identity, there is individuality that comes with it, and I think it's about celebrating that rather than finding a cookie cutter way to like make it all look the same, even though that's what we've been fed in the commercial industry in multiple areas. I think I like to encourage celebrating that uniqueness.
Now that you, so what is the next big project? What are the future projects that you're looking at now that you're working in New Blue and you've had some experience working with crafts and waste as one of the things that you're most interested in transforming the sustainable cycle and all of that? So what are projects that you're looking forward to? What are things that you want to experiment on? What's next for Dashari?
Ooh, there's lots of exciting things. So I definitely want to continue working with crafts in different capacities. So with Jaipur Blue Pottery, we are already creating products for the home. One project that I'm excited about is the passive cooling tiles. So we've taken the ability of the material to be porous and absorb moisture, and use it in a way that can reduce urban heating. So like it can cool buildings without energy.
Right.
So that's something I'm really excited about developing in the future. We've created tiles that we've tested, but to bring it to the market or to bring it, that's another long road.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm excited to work on that, develop that. Also excited to create more products within Blue Pottery. I think there's so much potential within the craft that's there to explore. With the Odisha Craft Odissi, I had a great experience working with Bell Metal. So I'm looking forward to doing something with that as well.
Definitely. I think they've been so excited, and I would love to share this with you that we did take the incense dispenser, which is, I think, one of your signature products from that residency, and we took it to the Hyderabad Design Democracy Fair. And I think it was one of the most questioned objects out there because it fascinated people, but they're also like, what is this? But when you explain the background and the reason of the shape is that of a cloud, and it's a dispenser at the same time, and why the designer was inspired to make that shape instead of the conventional incense dispenser, I think people just loved it. And I think the fact that it was just handmade and has so much potential, and you excited people here towards the potential that they've never seen. They've never seen objects of this sort. So I think Bell Metal definitely is an area which would love to see a little bit more of Dishari magic out there. So that would be a good space to see you in. I think we're coming to a point where I want to open the questions to the audience. But parting thoughts on your experience in on the emerging design scene in India, and any because of your varied experience and you've worked in so many different places, any last thoughts for young designers who are working and who are studying and aspiring to become designers in the coming days? What would be your thoughts around that and the design scene in India?
So for young designers, I'd say this is one of the professions that allows you to be hopeful, stay hopeful. There is always hope when you can make a change yourself with your work. So I think this is a great place to be. Again, be curious, be open-minded, and that's always a great starting point. And for the design scene, I'd say it's a great, exciting time for us in India to do the work, to celebrate where we come from, and to create work that is informed by the past, but conscious and hopeful for the future. So I'm really excited to see what's coming.
Brilliant. Dishari, it was lovely talking to you, and I want to give the last 5 minutes here to any questions that we have from the audience. If anybody has any questions, you have Dishari here, you might as well use the opportunity. Unless she's silenced everyone with her brilliant thoughts. Well, while people are thinking about it, I had one more question that I wanted to ask. I remember you talking to me about displaying some of the objects that we've had in the Milan Design Week. You've managed to participate in a lot of these design weeks and festivals. And you've also, I think, attended some of the design fairs in India, India Design Fair and the others. What was your experience like working in some of these festivals, and how was Indian design perceived in some way, if that's a question? Yeah, Sukanya, you can go ahead with the question if you want. I'll come back to this later.
More than a question. I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No, please go ahead.
Thank you for an absolutely fascinating conversation. I just loved it. It serves serves me in a lot of ways because it validates a lot of things that I am working on. And thank you, Dishari, for shining the light on certain things that were fuzzy to me. I'll just give you a bit of a context. My 18-year-old niece is very excited about working in transdisciplinary design, and we've been having conversations around heritage and culture and crafts, and so it just, you have given me so much information and so much to think about. Thank you very much. My question is, when are you coming back to Orissa to explore our absolutely incredible legacy, but that needs the kind of work that you are doing now, informed by the past but conscious about the present and the future?
Wow. Well, I am so glad this was helpful. I was nervous in the beginning. I hope whatever I say is like helpful to someone, but it's so great to hear that this is helpful for your niece. And when am I coming back to Orissa? Whenever we talk with beads and figure out a situation where we can do something exciting together again.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'd love to come. There's not just bell metal, there's so much going on in Orissa craft wise. There's so much to learn from. I can't wait.
Also because, the roadblocks are there, the challenges are there, things are disappearing, practices are disappearing. People are so taken in by, like you said, those finished, perfectly drawn plastic ware and stuff, that when I go to villages, when I meet communities, when I talk to children, as simple a thing as a surahi is what they don't know.
Yeah, and this was one of the things we've had a chance to talk to Sukanya. Just to give you some background, Dishari, Sukanya works leads a school in Bhubaneswar where they try very creative learning methods for kids to learn in different ways. And one of the things which we were attempting to do was just the absolute lack of knowledge about crafts in our schooling system, like zero, which we suffered from when we were drawing. Unless you made an effort to go out there, we wanted to get some of the kids to come and see the OCO exhibition, so that they get a first-hand idea of possibilities in. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but it's something that we're aspiring to, because otherwise they just grow up in a state without absolutely zero knowledge of this vast creative reservoir that's all around them.
No, not just that. The angle of sustainability, seasonalities, the cultural, the weave of, the things, whether it's our food, whether the food and therefore the bartan and therefore, all of those things. So it's, we try doing this, like, for example, how do you make a child understand sustainability? We make them go through stuff like we have this Kartik Purnima festival where all over the state people float boats. The children have learned to make boats out of banana stem, which is biodegradable. We've just been able to explain to them that single-use plastic must be banned. So children are now going back to their parents and saying, we are not carrying our tiffin boxes in plastic bags, please. So how do you link sustainability and crafts so that it passes on? That otherwise, I think there are times when I think that beyond, after my generation or maybe a generation or two, there won't be anybody to tell the story or even tell them about what was there.
Well, I guess hope springs eternal with designers like Dishari and others who are working in rejuvenating. Yeah.
Be inspired. So thank you, and I'm glad I was able to find the time to come here today.
Thanks so much, Sukanya. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions while we have Dishari? One last question before we let it be. Okay. All right, just going back to my question, what was your experience with the festivals?
Oh yeah. The festivals, it was amazing. it was so there was not a lot of Indian design at Milan when I went.
Right.
There was, I think, 2 or 3 of us, but people were really curious because they were seeing things they had never seen before. So it was
Okay.
not about like whether I'm going with the baggage of being Indian and
Yeah.
working with artisans, or like there is a certain connotation that sometimes bothers me, that you
Yeah.
show the artisans and because we come from a developing country and so forth. But there was none of that. They were curious about what they were seeing. They were curious about why it was being made the way it was being made. So that was
Right.
quite refreshing. And the good thing about going to these festivals is that there is an audience that sees your product in a completely different light. So there was
Right.
one person that came up to me for New Blue, and they were suggesting a collaboration on creating products for a beauty ritual spa,
Okay.
where they wanted to curate like the little pots and things that they do, beauty stuff with. And
Yeah.
that was like, I would have never thought of that.
Yeah.
And something similar to that, there was one company that was wanting to create like dials, watch
Right.
dials,
Right.
with the ceramics and customize them.
Yeah.
And so you go and explore, and you also learn so much
Right.
because you see your work in that light.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. Also, just getting the exposure
Right.
is very important in terms of how to present the work, how to tell the story to an audience that has no context. They don't
Right.
understand why Indian crafts need to be preserved.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there would be no reason for them to either at the moment, considering how much I think crafts in India have gone through this phase of preservation, where a lot of people have done a lot of work around preservation, and which has allowed certain crafts to actually persevere, while others may not have been touched by that conservation drive. But I think right now we're at the stage, I believe, and this is my take on the design scene, we are the cusp of the evolution of the craft scene. And it's evolving in a direction where this latent reservoir that's there, it's going to create new things, and it'll not be seen as this exotic thing from the Orient, but it's going to be this really material and useful and a thing that fits in with the contemporary setting. And that's where I think Indian craft should be heading towards, because I think that should be the logical next step if we really want to like grow this and preserve this, because you can't just hold on to traditions beyond a point. It just makes it exotic after that. So
yeah. Also, just like looking at it from the sentiment of surviving, I think I just like to replace the word survive with thrive. Let's look at a way where crafts can not just survive but thrive. And looking at them as these like cultural identities that we have to hold on to. It's just so much more than that. Look at them as like living systems that we can learn from, with this whole like SDGs and the whole sustainability conversation. Like, we're on our way if we work with these communities.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's so much to even learn from these communities and these craft villages, which want to become like proper heritage villages and sustain craft. And every time you read about sustenance of crafts in places like Japan, where they have a craft museum where you have provenance for crafts. I just love the fact that there is provenance for crafts, like you have provenance in art. And you can trace back a certain object to the 16th century maker in some village who's done it, and he's considered to be a master. And I guess it's just a reflection of how we've structured our society, that we don't know the masters of the past who must have made some of the finest objects to have graced the Indian scene. So I think there is a lot of opportunity to even build that pride in making, that pride that I guess we've never really celebrated in our scene. So I think designers such as yourself and so many of the people that are working in the Indian craft scene, I think there's such a huge opportunity. I think it's just wonderful to be living in this age where all this is happening. And Dashari, thank you so much for taking the time out. I know you're at a personal function in London, but you did take some time out to attend. Thank you so much, and we learned a lot. Thanks so much for attending. the ADC session.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. I hope it was helpful.
And everyone wants to hear Dishari again. This video is going to get edited and uploaded to YouTube, so you can get to hear it when if you haven't managed to attend the session today. And thanks again, Dishari, and we'll be back next month with another exciting conversation in ADC. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dishari.